Have you ever paused, I mean really paused, to consider the sheer mind-bending concept of infinity? We often bump into it in maths, as a number that just goes on, or maybe in physics, talking about how vast the universe is. But what if infinity isn't just a quantitative thing, like a number too big to count or a space too large to cross? What if it's an idea so fundamental, so deeply embedded, that it kind of quietly shapes how we see reality itself? It's a concept that feels inherently profound, almost mystical, doesn't it? Something that always seems just beyond our grasp. We can point at it intellectually, but we can never quite nail it down or fully touch it. Okay, so let's try and unpack this a bit. Today, we're setting off on a genuinely fascinating exploration into where our understanding of infinity actually comes from. We're going to push way beyond the simple mathematical definitions you might know and dig into the deeper philosophical and, even the spiritual roots of this huge idea.
Our mission in this deep dive, really, is to help you understand not just what infinity might be in all its different forms, but maybe more importantly, how we, as finite beings, even manage to conceive of it in the first place. And we're drawing our insights today from a truly thought-provoking text by Oscar Muñoz called The Genealogy of Infinity. It's a work that gives a unique and, frankly, pretty radical perspective, challenging a lot of our usual assumptions about this boundless idea. So prepare to have your understanding stretched a little. Muñoz, he kicks things off with his characteristic boldness, asking a question that sounds simple, almost disarmingly so, but it very quickly unravels into something incredibly complex. He asks, where does our idea of infinitude come from? Now, if you're like most people, your mind probably leaps to a kind of knee-jerk answer. Right?
Mm-hmm. We tend to think intuitively comes from observation, or maybe just logically extending something we already know. We might try to picture it, endless space or time stretching infinitely back and forward, or maybe just numbers getting bigger and bigger forever. Those are our usual mental models for infinite.
The go-to images.
Exactly. But this is precisely where Muñoz starts to systematically take apart those easy assumptions. He leads us on this journey that really forces us to question the foundations of our intuitive grasp.
Indeed. And one of the very first and I think most critical assumptions Muñoz tackles and then promptly strips away is this idea that our concept of infinity comes from direct experience. He makes this really unequivocal statement asserting that our experience is, and I'm quoting here, todo limitation angostura y lazo, which for our listeners translates roughly to all limitation, narrowness, and ties.
Limitation, narrowness, and ties.
Okay. And this point is absolutely foundational to his whole argument. It's crucial because it immediately makes us confront the built-in boundaries of our own perception, our own existence. Just think about it for a second. Every single sensation, every observation, every interaction you've ever had or could possibly have is bounded. It has a start and an end, a perimeter, a duration, a defined quality.
Right. Everything's contained somehow.
Precisely. We perceive finite objects, we exist in finite moments, we move through finite spaces. You can look up at the night sky and marvel at, the countless stars, but even that active scene is limited. Your field of vision is finite, your ability to focus is finite, and each star, no matter how far, is still a discrete thing, a measurable entity. You can measure the duration of any event, from a quick blink to a whole human life. You can walk to the edge of a field, travel to the horizon, even go around the globe. But in none of these direct experiences do we actually encounter something that is truly boundless, truly without end. Everything we touch, see, hear, feel, it has a limit.
So you've never directly experienced something truly infinite.
Exactly. You've never experienced something that just keeps going forever with no boundary, no conclusion. Muñoz's point forces us beyond the obvious. It makes us think, well, the origin of this huge idea must lie somewhere else, precisely because it's not something we can just point to in our sensory world.
Okay, so if our direct empirical experience is inherently limited, fenced in, and therefore can't be the source, what's the next kind of intuitive leap? I think many of us would probably jump straight to the idea that infinity is just the opposite of finite.
Yeah, the negation.
Right. It's what you get when you take finite and just say, not that. If something isn't limited, it must be unlimited. If it's not bounded, it has to be boundless. That seems perfectly logical, almost self-evident.
Yeah.
That's how we often define things, right? By contrasting them with what they're not. But again, Muñoz challenges this seemingly straightforward path. He says something quite provocative. Una negación de lo finito sigue siendo algo finito. A negation of the finite, he argues, still ends up being something finite. Now that statement, just hearing it, feels like a paradox, doesn't it? How can not finite still be finite?
It does sound counterintuitive at first.
Yeah. But let's really dive into what he means here. A simple,
not finite, doesn't actually define what infinity is in itself, in its essence. It only tells you what it isn't. And even that definition, just by its nature, is still fundamentally tied to and relative to the concept of finitude.
Exactly. It's like if I tell you something is not a chair, you haven't actually gained any positive information about what the object is.
Right, you just know one thing it's not.
Precisely. You only know what it's not. And the concept itself, not a chair, still operates within that finite category of chair and its conceptual neighborhood. It doesn't suddenly transport you into a completely different realm of understanding. Muñoz is suggesting this negative definition is just, well, utterly insufficient to capture the real nature of infinity. It's like trying to define the boundless by constantly referring back to the boundaries it supposedly rejects.
Okay, I think I'm following that. It's defining it by what it isn't, which keeps it tied to what it isn't.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Muñoz is making a really profound point about the whole act of negation itself. He implies that for infinity to truly be defined by negation, the negation itself would somehow have to be infinite. He explains this with even more precision, saying, Solo una negación continuada y sin término de lo finito calificaría como negación de la infinitud. Es decir, la negación tendría que hacerse infinita.
Okay, can you break that down a bit?
Sure. It translates roughly to only a continued and unending negation of the finite would qualify as a negation of infinity, meaning the negation itself would have to become infinite. Think about what that implies. If you're trying to reach infinity by constantly saying, not this finite thing and not that finite thing and not the next finite thing, you're actually starting an endless process of saying no.
Right, a process that never stops.
Exactly. And that process itself, to truly define infinity, would have to be infinite. It creates this kind of self-referential loop that never actually resolves, never truly arrives at infinity. It just highlights that infinity isn't simply the other side of finitude, like a simple mirror image. And this leads us to a really crucial distinction that Muñoz emphasizes very strongly. Por lo tanto, la infinitud no es lo contrario de la finitud, pues las cosas contrarias se comprenden una a partir de la otra, y la infinitud se comprende cuando raramente se comprende desde su propia naturaleza.
Okay, translate that one too.
It means, roughly, therefore, infinity is not the opposite of finitude, because contrary things are understood one from the other, and infinity is understood when it is rarely understood from its own nature.
From its own nature, not from its opposite.
Precisely. This is a vital conceptual shift. Infinity, in Muñoz's view, stands completely alone. It isn't defined by what it isn't, nor by its relationship to its apparent opposite. It is sui generis, a term meaning of its own kind. It's understood solely from its unique inherent nature.
Wow.
This observation really changes the game. It forces us to ask. If we can't define it by what it isn't and we can't experience it directly, how on earth do we even begin to define what it is? How do we access this unique nature he's talking about?
That's a powerful 1-2 punch against both experience and negation. So if those paths are blocked, where does a philosophical mind go next? Many would probably turn to another huge philosophical idea.
Yeah.
What about pure intuition? Exactly. If you know your philosophy, your mind likely jumps straight to Immanuel Kant, whose work just revolutionized how we think about perception. Kant famously argued that space and time aren't things we learn from the world, but rather they are pure intuitions. They're fundamental, innate structures of our minds, kind of built into the fabric of our cognition that allow us to experience anything at all.
The preconditions for experience.
Right, the conditions of possibility for any experience. Our minds, Kant said, automatically impose space and time onto the raw sense data, giving it structure, making it coherent. So it sounds like a really promising candidate for where our idea of infinity comes from, doesn't it? Something built right into our perceptual framework, not learned, not deduced, but just intrinsic to how we process reality.
It feels like a plausible internal source rather than external. It does seem plausible at first glance, absolutely. But Muñoz, with his typical rigor, methodically shows why infinity doesn't quite fit this Kantian model either. He explains it like this. Pero si la infinitud no es una experiencia, no puede estar asociada ni al espacio ni al tiempo, pues ni espacio ni tiempo son condiciones de algo que no esté en la experiencia.
Okay, let's get the translation on that.
It means, but if infinity is not an experience, it cannot be associated with space or time, because neither space nor time are conditions for something that is not an experience. This is a really elegant, very precise logical step he's taking here.
Right.
Kant's pure intuitions, space and time, they are the fundamental prerequisites for our experience of the world. They provide the universal framework, the grid, within which all our sensory input gets organized. However, if, as Muñoz has carefully argued, infinity is not something we experience directly,
Which he established earlier?
right, then by definition, space and time cannot be the framework or the lens through which we grasp it. It's a fundamental mismatch. Space and time are conditions for experience, and infinity lies outside experience.
Ah, I see. So they're the wrong tool for the job,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. They condition something experience which infinity is not. This insight really forces you to rethink how fundamental some of our mental categories truly are, and how something as profound as infinity might actually exist completely outside even those most basic, seemingly inherent structures of our mind, like space and time.
Mm-hmm.
It strongly suggests that infinity operates on a totally different plane of understanding, distinct from our usual sensory or spatiotemporal ways of perceiving. It pushes us beyond the very lenses we normally use to organize and make sense of reality. So if we can't see it, can't logically deduce it as not finite, and can't even intuitively structure it within our minds using Kant's categories, well, what's left?
And Muñoz, he's never one to shy away from the big radical claims, is he? He pushes this line of thought even further. He doesn't just say infinity isn't a pure intuition. He makes an even bolder statement about space and time themselves, really expanding our view of these concepts we usually take for granted. He says, Ni espacio ni tiempo son infinitos, vienen limitados por la conciencia fuerza, chit, en términos del Vedanta, es decir, espacio y tiempo son formas de chit.
Right, and this is where Muñoz introduces a concept that radically flips our perspective, cheat. It's drawn from Vedanta philosophy, and it means something like consciousness force.
Consciousness force, okay.
This isn't just a word choice, it fundamentally shifts the perceived power dynamic between consciousness and reality. Muñoz is positioning space and time not as the ultimate boundless realities we often assume them to be.
Like the container for everything.
Exactly, but rather as manifestations or forms of a deeper, more fundamental consciousness. They are, in a way, contained by chi, not the other way around. Think of it like this. Instead of space and time being the vast, endless canvas on which existence is painted,
They become more like specific colors or maybe particular brushstrokes used by a greater underlying consciousness force to create, perceive, and experience reality. Like the rules of a game aren't reality itself, but expressions within a larger conscious field.
wow, okay, so space and time are expressions of consciousness, not the boundaries around it.
That's the implication. And it's enormous, circling back to our question. If space and time are themselves limited by, or forms of, this chit, this ultimate consciousness force, then by definition, they absolutely cannot contain or define infinity. Infinity must exist on a level even more fundamental than space and time, or perhaps it's intrinsically linked to chit itself, maybe even its very nature. Therefore, Muñoz concludes, with all these avenues closed off, la infinitud no es tampoco una intuición pura. Infinity is not a pure intuition either.
So you can see he's just systematically dismantled every obvious candidate we might think of for where our idea of infinity comes from.
Experience, negation, pure intuition, none of them fit. We're left with a real mystery, completely unmoored from our usual ways of thinking. We've stripped away all the usual suspects. So here we are then, standing at this kind of philosophical crossroads. We've methodically shown, following Muñoz, that our idea of infinity doesn't come from direct sensory experience. It's not just a logical negation of finite. And it's not even a pure intuition like space and time, because they are contained by something even more fundamental. So Muñoz asks the big question, entonces, ¿qué es la infinitud? What is infinity if it's none of these things we normally use to define reality? And this is where the argument takes a really unexpected turn, because the answer Muñoz gives feels less like a definition and more like a profound ancient riddle. It pushes us into a realm way beyond comfortable conventional logic.
Right. Given that he's negated all these possibilities, one might feel incredibly tempted, almost forced to just say, isn't that?
It is nothing.
Exactly. It is nothing. This is a common philosophical reflex, isn't it? When something just completely defies our categories, our minds often default to calling it nothingness. But can nothing truly exist as a concept we can name, discuss, or even think about without turning it into something?
Ah, the paradox.
It's a paradox. Muñoz points it out directly, this inherent, inescapable problem. Claro que si digo que algo es nada, incurro en la paradoja de que lo hago algo por el mero hecho de hacerlo término de una oración. Which means, of course, if I say that something is nothing, I fall into the paradox of making it something just by making it the term of a sentence. Think about that for a second. It really challenges how you see basic language and logic. Just by saying the phrase, the concept of nothing, you've already made nothing into a concept, which is undeniably a something in your mind, an intellectual entity, a linguistic marker.
You're giving it a label, making it a thing.
Precisely. You're giving it form, presence, a cognitive reality simply by talking about its non-existence. It becomes an object of thought, however abstract. You try to pin it down with words, definitions, mental boxes. But in the very act of trying to name its non-being, it slips through your fingers, becoming a something in the process. It's a linguistic and conceptual trap that really highlights the limits of our dualistic either thinking.
Okay, so if it can't be nothing in that absolute empty sense,
Right.
but it also stubbornly refuses all our other definitions and categories, what can it possibly be? Muñoz, rather than trying to just resolve this deep contradiction, he kind of limps into it. He embraces the paradox. He gives us this intriguing answer that holds both sides at once. He writes, La infinitud es entonces algo, lo que muestra que es algo distinto y único, algo que está aquí y no está aquí.
Infinity is then something and nothing, something distinct and unique, something that is here and not here. Yeah. This is a truly crucial insight into how Muñoz understands infinity. It's not just a paradox, it is the paradox itself. Infinity exists in this liminal space, this profoundly undefined zone of being and non-being simultaneously.
It's not one or the other.
Right, it's both. Or maybe it transcends the whole need to be either. It just defies our standard dualistic thinking, which needs clear either boxes. Muñoz highlights its distinct and unique nature precisely because it doesn't fit into our usual logical structures. This strongly suggests that our conventional logic, built on binary opposites and clear definitions, is simply, well, insufficient to fully grasp true infinity. It seems to demand a different mode of understanding, maybe one that can comfortably hold apparently contradictory truths at the same time, without that immediate urge to resolve them.
And this description, something and nothing here and not here, it really resonates with something incredibly ancient, doesn't it?
It does.
Something deeply spiritual, echoing through wisdom traditions all over the world. Muñoz makes this connection explicit. He directly links it to a profound, universal human experience. He says, Eso siempre ha sido llamado el gran misterio, lo divino que se oculta y se muestra como sombra a la vez.
This has always been called the great mystery, the divine that hides and shows itself as a shadow at the same time.
The great mystery.
So this naturally leads us to ask, what exactly does he mean by connecting infinity to the divine here? Muñoz clarifies he's not talking about the Deus absconditus of the ancients.
The hidden God.
Right, the hidden God, a deity whose nature is completely unknowable, utterly beyond us. Instead, he says, Este misterio no sería exactamente el Deus absconditus de los antiguos, sino algo más parecido al pleroma que en Vedanta se llama Parabrahman.
Okay, those are some big terms. Pleroma, Parabrahman.
Yeah, let's unpack those briefly. They're pretty central to his view. Deus absconditus implies that distant, inaccessible divine. Pleroma, which comes from Gnosticism, refers more to the totality, the fullness of divine power, and being like an overflowing abundance, a complete, encompassing reality.
Okay, fullness.
And Parabrahman in Vedanta philosophy signifies the supreme, absolute, formless Brahman, the ultimate reality that transcends all attributes, all distinctions, all dualities. It encompasses everything that is and isn't.
So, beyond all definition.
Exactly. The key distinction Muñoz is making is that this great mystery of infinity isn't just a hidden God, but an overflowing, all-encompassing fullness. It's a totality that embraces and transcends being and non-being, presence and absence, the manifest and the unmanifest. It's the ultimate reality, boundless in every possible way, an infinite whole from which all finite existence emerges and maybe to which it returns. This connection really opens up a profoundly spiritual dimension to infinity. It suggests it's not just a mathematical idea or philosophical puzzle, but maybe the very fabric of ultimate reality itself, something you might intuitively sense or glimpse in moments of deep awe, even if you can't logically pin it down. It speaks to this profound interconnectedness at the deepest level.
Okay, so we've systematically taken apart every external candidate for where our idea of infinity comes from. We've journeyed through its paradoxical nature, this something and nothing, and connected to these huge spiritual concepts, the great mystery, Paroma, Parabrahman. So, if infinity is this great mystery and it doesn't come from outside experience or logic, where does our idea of it truly originate? Muñoz, having shut down all the external sources, brings us full circle with a truly mind-bending proposal. It radically reorients the whole search. And this is where the argument takes an absolutely breathtaking and really quite personal turn. It shifts the ground under our feet. He posits this. Si no procede de ninguna parte, si a la vez es algo y es nada, la infinitud que intentamos entender y no podemos tiene que estar en nosotros, tiene que ser nuestra naturaleza.
Which translates to, if it proceeds from nowhere, if at the same time it is something and it is nothing, the infinity that we try to understand and cannot has to be in us, it has to be our nature.
It has to be in us, our nature.
That's the radical shift. The search for infinity's origin is no longer external, not even purely abstract philosophy. It moves inward, deep inside us, into our very essence. This is a profound philosophical and existential statement. It implies that our capacity to even think about infinity, even imperfectly, even paradoxically, isn't something we learn from outside.
It's because we are it, somehow.
Or connected to it. Or it is us, in some fundamental way. It turns the mirror right back on us. We aren't just observers trying to grasp a vast external infinity. We actually embody a spark of it, an inherent capacity for it. Our deep urge to understand infinity, our constant questioning of it, is in this view a deep longing to understand ourselves at the most fundamental level. It's like an echo of infinity within our own being.
That's a truly profound thought, but it immediately brings up a challenge for our everyday understanding, doesn't it? How can we, as seemingly finite beings, limited bodies, limited lifespans, limited perception, how can we possibly contain something infinite? That just doesn't seem to square with how we usually see ourselves as individual, bounded things.
Right, the container problem. Muñoz anticipates this very natural objection, and once again he offers this profound reorientation, flipping our usual understanding completely on its head. He states, pero nuestra formación finita no puede contener lo infinito, por tanto tiene que ser lo infinito lo que nos contiene.
Okay, but our finite formation cannot contain the infinite, therefore.
It has to be the infinite that contains us.
So it contains us, not the other way around.
Exactly. It's a complete inversion of that container-contained relationship. It's not about us trying to hold infinity within our limited minds or bodies. It is infinity that holds us. This reverses the standard picture. Our individual, limited consciousness, our finite existence, it's not a barrier to infinity. Instead, it's seen as a small, temporary part within a much vaster, infinite consciousness.
Like a wave in the ocean.
Precisely. We're not the finite bottle trying to hold the infinite ocean. We are drops within that infinite ocean, manifestations of its boundless nature. This points towards a holistic, deeply interconnected reality where the individual isn't separate, but an integral, temporary expression of the greater infinite, held within it always.
And this incredible idea of infinity containing us, being our nature, it leads to one of the most poetic and, frankly, awe-inspiring lines in the whole text, a concept that really shifts the focus of our inquiry and gives our intellectual searching a kind of cosmic significance. Muñoz writes, Es la infinitud lo que se pregunta sobre sí misma desde nosotros.
It is infinity that asks about itself through us.
Wow.
This insight, it reveals a truly breathtaking idea, self-awareness on a cosmic scale. Our inquiries, our philosophical struggles, our scientific explorations, our very human curiosity about infinity, these aren't just our questions, springing only from our individual minds. They are, in a profound way, the universe's questions. Or maybe more accurately, the infinite's questions, manifesting, echoing, expressing themselves through us.
So we're like the sense organs of the infinite.
In a way, yes. We become the instruments, the conduits, the brief focal points through which the infinite contemplates its own nature, explores its own vastness, seeks to understand itself. Our consciousness, our human ability to think and wonder and ask these deep questions, it becomes a localized point of the infinite's own self-reflection.
So my own curiosity about this isn't just me.
Muñoz suggests it's potentially a fundamental aspect of reality expressing itself through you. How profound is that? It lifts our intellectual and spiritual searching from just a human thing to a kind of cosmic dialogue.
Okay, so given all of this, if infinity really is our nature, and it sort of chose us, in a way, to be the medium through which it asks about itself, then it must follow that we have this deep inherent connection to it, a lineage that goes way beyond our normal idea of birth and origin. Muñoz talks about this connection, this radical shift in identity, he says, En este sentido, digo que somos estirpe de la infinitud, linaje de lo que nunca ha nacido, y por tanto también no nacidos.
In this sense, I say that we are kin of infinity, lineage of what has never been born, and therefore also unborn.
Kin of infinity, lineage of what has never been born, unborn. What does that actually mean for us?
Well, that phrase, linaje de lo que nunca ha nacido, lineage of what has never been born. It points directly to an existence beyond the finite cycle of birth and death we normally think of, beyond a specific starting point in linear time. It speaks to a fundamental, eternal quality. Our true essence in this view isn't bound by a limited beginning. It's an affirmation of a deeper, timeless identity that comes before and goes beyond our individual physical life.
So it challenges our whole idea of who we are.
Fundamentally, it suggests a spiritual or transcendent core to our being, one that partakes directly in the boundless, unoriginated nature of the infinite itself. We aren't just born into the world at some point. At our core, we are an expression of something that has always been and always will be. It gives our existence this sense of cosmic heritage.
But even with such a magnificent, truly awe-inspiring heritage, this profound truth about who we are, Muñoz notes there's a powerful, almost primal human reaction. It's not just intellectual agreement. There's an emotional response. He observes, Cuando digo en el aforismo que el infinito nos ha elegido y que nos amedrenta a aceptar nuestro abolengo, expreso lo inevitable del miedo y la fragilidad y ternura de nuestra negación.
Which translates as, when I say in the aphorism that the infinite has chosen us and that it frightens us to accept our ancestry, I express the inevitability of fear and the fragility and tenderness of our denial.
The inevitability of fear.
Yeah, the striking thing here is his direct acknowledgement of fear as inevitable. This isn't just abstract philosophy. It touches our deepest human anxieties, our resistance. Why would accepting our infinite ancestry be frightening? Well, maybe because that acceptance implies the dissolving of our familiar finite sense of self.
Our ego, our boundaries.
Exactly. Our carefully built boundaries, our cherished sense of individual control, the distinctness of our ego. Infinity represents this overwhelming vastness, a boundlessness that our limited minds just struggle to comprehend or contain. This fear, Muñoz suggests, is natural, almost instinctual. It's a human reaction to the sublime, the incomprehensible. It's the fragility and tenderness of our limited ego, our small self, recoiling from the immense, boundless truth of its real nature. Have you ever felt that overwhelming sense of insignificance, maybe, or just pure awe when looking at the stars or thinking about cosmic time?
Yeah, definitely.
That feeling, Muñoz might suggest, could be a glimpse of this inherent feel of our true infinite nature, a fear of losing our small, safe self in that boundlessness.
And our denial of this incredible cosmic heritage. Muñoz says it's quite childlike. A stubborn, almost petulant refusal to see beyond our self-made limits. He uses this wonderfully vivid and frankly quite humbling analogy to describe this human resistance. He explains it as una negación tan inútil como testaruda infantil que nos lleva a pensar que nuestras finitas objeciones a lo infinito tienen cabida más allá del pequeño parque de barrio en el que queremos pelear con otro niño por ser primero en tirarse por el tobogán. Wow, okay, let's break that down. A denial is useless as it is stubborn, infantile.
Yeah.
Which leads us to think that our finite objections to the infinite have a place beyond the small neighborhood park where we believe we are fighting with another child to be first down the slide.
Or the slide. If we put this in the big picture, this powerful analogy just cuts right through our intellectual defenses. It speaks to the core of our resistance. Muñoz calls our denial useless, stubborn, infantile. He suggests that all our sophisticated arguments, our scientific limits, our existential worries, all the ways we try to box in the infinite from the perspective of the infinite itself, they're like kids squabbling in a tiny park.
Yeah.
We're metaphorically fighting over who gets the next turn on the swing, convinced our little finite concerns and arguments actually matter on cosmic scale or have the power to define ultimate reality. The implication is incredibly profound and humbling too. It means our finite objections, no matter how smart or emotionally real they feel to us, are ultimately insignificant against the backdrop of true infinity. They're useless because they can't actually contain or define the boundless. They're stubborn because we cling to them so hard even though they're inadequate. And they're infantile because they represent this limited, self-centered view, unable to grasp the vastness of our actual heritage.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it?
Right.
Reflect on the scale of our worries versus everything.
Exactly. It challenges you to ask yourself, are you metaphorically playing in this small, fenced-in park when a whole infinite universe, which is actually your true home, is waiting? It's an invitation to step beyond those limits we set for ourselves.
So what is this extraordinary journey, this deep dive into Oscar Muñoz's genealogy of infinity? What does it all mean for us, for you listening? Finite being is grappling with this immense idea.
We started by asking where our idea of infinity even comes from, and through Muñoz's careful deconstruction, we've seen how it's likely not from experience, not just negation, not even a pure intuition like space and time, which he argues are themselves contained by something deeper, this consciousness force. We've journeyed through that profound paradox of infinity being both something and nothing. We've connected it to these vast, ancient spiritual ideas, Pleroma, Parabrahman, the great mystery that hides and shows itself. And ultimately, we've landed on this radical, maybe transformative idea. Infinity isn't just out there, distant and separate. Instead, it is our very nature. It contains us. It even asks its own questions through us. We are, as Muñoz so beautifully puts it, kin of infinity, the lineage of what was never born. And yet, as he observes, we often fear accepting this grand, boundless ancestry. We cling to our finite objections, our small selves, like children arguing in a tiny, familiar playground.
So this whole exploration leaves us, and you, with a really significant question to ponder, doesn't it? If our finite minds are, as Muñoz suggests, just the playground, the localized point where infinity briefly glances at itself, if we are truly the lineage of the unborn, ultimately contained by the infinite, well, what profound responsibilities or maybe insights might that understanding give us? Regarding our own lives, our choices, our place in the cosmos, consider deeply how understanding your ancestry as fundamentally infinite might radically change how you see life's perceived limits, or conversely, how you see its boundless possibilities. This idea, then, it isn't just about huge distances in space or endless numbers. It's about the very essence of what you are, and maybe, just maybe, what the universe, through your own consciousness, is asking of itself.